Can we bring back the Red Scare somehow? McCarthyism 2.0, better dead than red resurgence. I mean, I think it'd be good on the Democrat side, but we should be more scared about the fascism on the right, I think. One thing that was interesting to me, I still don't think we're quite at the World War I Germany thing, because I think the Treaty of Versailles and the hyperinflation that Germany experienced, I think were probably big factors into the rise of the Nazi Party. But one thing that I see as a parallel that's interesting to me is Richard Evans talks a lot about how the Nazis didn't invent anti-Semitism. Hitler didn't invent anti-Semitism. And when anti-Semitism was rising in pre- and post-World War I Germany, it wasn't accepted by most of the population. But the scary thing was the acceptableness of it, or the revulsion of it, changed over time. And you got to a point to where the Nazi Party could come about, and being a full-on insane anti-Semite was okay because it had been made palatable by the earlier parties as the anti-Semitism became tolerated kind of like more and more over time, if that makes sense. So the comparison to today, I think that's kind of worrying, is I feel like before, the Republicans at least are openly like very anti-Semitic, right? Like you're not going to have like an anti-Semitic anybody in the Republican Party because they're all Israeli simps. But I feel like the anti-Semitism stuff today, I think has been really normalized among younger people and in social media. That's pretty spooky, I think. Although I'm not Jewish, so fuck them. But it is kind of crazy that I feel like you could. No, I was gonna say you could get away with being more openly anti-Semitic and not get in trouble, but I think you already can. I'm trying to think if there are Republican lawmakers that. I don't think any lawmakers, even like your crazy Marjorie Taylor Greens or whatever, even if they have like an anti-Semitic conspiracy or two about Jews controlling weather machines, I don't think they're openly anti-Semitic. But I feel like the environment has been prepared for anti-Semitism. Have you heard of the idea that a sophisticated enough AI model could solve the computation problem of command economies and be better than capitalist markets? I've heard it. We'll see when it happens. Would you be willing to read up on the AUKUS agreement between Australia and the US? It's been a huge debate here in Australia, whether or not we would screw over Trump with it. Maybe at some point. I think they made fun of Tulsi because she didn't know what that was. I don't know. I'd never heard of that before. It was either that or some other agreement. There's a ton of acronym agreements that I just don't know about. Here's Charlie Kirk being super anti-Semitic. Trump said Schumer isn't Jewish anymore and that Jews that didn't vote for him are disloyal. Pretty anti-Semitic and suffer no consequences. Again, I'm going to take an L because nobody agrees with me on this, but I don't care. I don't think Trump saying that is necessarily anti-Semitic. I think that somebody like Trump, I think genuinely is like looking at it through the lens of Israeli support and political support in the United States. Unless I've missed some huge part of Trump, I don't think Trump could ever be anti-Semitic. He might be like anti-Semitic out of like convenience, maybe like buying into a conspiracy, but I don't know if Trump has it in him at that age. And just based on everything I've seen, to be like super anti-Semitic, like in reality. But the globalist is Jew for Republican officials, so they all signal it, not openly, but they do dual signaling for denial purposes. Are globalists really Jewish, though, for Republican officials? I feel like it's more... I think you could connect it quickly, because they do like the neo-postmodern Marxist shit, or at least that was what Jordan Peterson used to say, but like the deep state and the globalists are their version of the Jew. But I don't know if they're actually signaling Jews when they say that. I don't think... The mainstream Republican Party isn't, not yet. I do think that other people do. But I think there's enough of a conflation that it could switch pretty quickly. I think it could. Yeah. The scary thing would just be if Donald Trump wills it. Because if Donald Trump wills it, the whole party will more or less follow suit, which I think would be really spooky.
All right, so two things. Number one, if I were to give PR advice to the IDF, of which they haven't listened to a thing I've said, because it's just been kind of a joke. They're doing better in the last week. I got to say, the Israeli government, they've been better. Largely because people aren't talking about it as much. Is very simple. Talk about this as a war of liberation, okay? You are here to liberate people being held captive by Hamas. There's too much confluence. Say that we are coming here to liberate you from your captors. First of all, it's true. So it has the side benefit of being true. But that's less of an invasion and more of we are here to spring you free to flourish. And by the way, if we go a level deeper, if you look at it, it then makes the people seem deeply unthankful. Israel will end up freeing the people of Gaza, and they'll be hated for doing it. But I think you could win far more PR points, at least with some normies and some people in the middle, if you say, we are here to free you from your captives, to get you out of captivity. Just honestly, IDF, this whole thing that we're going to kill every last person of Hamas, it's true, it's honest, it's fine, not working in the West. By the way, you don't even have to define what freedom would mean, okay? Some form of self, not Hamas, okay? You don't have to get too into the details. I think a war of liberation would help. Anyway, the point is this. That's just PR stuff. To piggyback on what we were talking about with Senator Ted Cruz, this is something that there is this massive reckoning, cognitive dissonance. By the way, there is this incredible tweet, Eli Klein, quote, "Today's election day. I'm a lifelong Democrat, but as a Jew, I'll be voting Republican. Republicans will do a lot more to curb anti-Semitism than Democrats, who are not treating anti-Semitism nearly as seriously as they've been treating the most petty examples of other bigotry." Wow. Eli Klein from New York, voting Republican for the first time. But here's what what Jewish Democrats or Jews in general are going to have to make a decision. Until you crush the cultural Marxist lens of which they view the world, you will never actually be able to build support for Israel.
Jesus, holy Christ. When Charlie is talking political strategy, I've only seen him talk to Gavin Newsom and then this, so I have to hedge. But I feel like he has a better understanding of political messaging than I think anyone I've ever heard speak online before my entire life. Jesus. His politics are horrible though, but his understanding of political strategy, I think is very good. This is true, and it's one of the only times using this cultural Marxist shit actually makes sense.
Lens of which they view the world.
I have one of my Israeli interviews. I think I was talking to August will post these eventually. Okay. But yeah, the biggest point that I was trying to get across when I was talking to people in Israel, which is they don't understand the West at all. I'm so sorry. You guys are Arabs, all right? As much as you guys pretend that you're like a Western country and you blah, blah, you guys, the mentality is not there, okay? But I love you, my Jewish brothers and sisters. That one thing I feel like Jews don't understand is, I think that now, this is my opinion. I haven't seen a lot of like opinion polling in the US about this, so I'm vibing in a little bit. But I think historically, the Israeli story was always sympathetic in the West because it initially was a really cool story. A bunch of people get holocausted. They go to the Middle East, and then through fucking fire and flames, okay, through blood and war, they managed to carve out, against overwhelming odds, a small nation state in a land that, I'm sorry, for all the Bible says is flowing with milk and honey, fucking sucks shit. Okay, they're fighting wars over water sources in Syria just to get water in their dog shit land that has nothing in it, no natural resources. All the agrariable, what do you call it when you make things like agriculture ready? All of that land had to be worked and made into that. It's just a horrible place to live. And they managed to do it basically all on their own for like at least until 73. So like 20, 25 years. That story is really, really, really cool. However, that is not the story of Israel anymore. Ever since the 90s, with the fall of the Soviet Union, with Egypt and Jordan having formal peace agreements, with the Gulf states continuing to basically not even exist militarily, I still don't believe those countries have any militaries at all, and I will not believe it until I see proof otherwise. The story of Israel now is Israel, the big bad military bullies, against the Palestinians, who are fucked, and then some splinter groups like Hezbollah. That's it. That's not an inspiring story. It's not a cool story. Nobody from millennial on downward is feeling sympathetic for anything that happens to Israel because of what he's saying here, the cultural Marxist lens of oppressor versus oppressee. Whereas before, it was Israel versus the entire Arab world. Now it's just Israel versus the Palestinians. And I know me and Elon argued over this, I think on his podcast and I think in that car. And because in Israel, they always repeat this. They go, the 7 fronts. Israel's fighting 7 fronts right now. The 7 fronts. Motherfucker, no one in the world sees you fighting 7 fronts. They just see you fighting the Palestinians. That's it. Nobody knows anything or gives a fuck about it. And also, like, the other fronts aren't even, like, bro, Iran? Come on, what are they going to do? You literally are flying into their country, bombing their shit, going home and doing victory laps, and they're shooting like missiles at you that are getting intercepted by literally half the fucking globe. Okay, they're not doing shit to you. So as long as Israel is fighting this war, and they're going to view it through the cultural Marxist lens of, I don't know if cultural Marxist is a real word. I shouldn't borrow that because I don't know, these fuckers make up shit. But the oppressor-oppressee dynamic, right? Where, oh, Israel's the big guy and the Palestinians are the small guy. You cannot win that argument. It's over. There's no way to ever look good in that conflict. You always look bad.
Eli Klein from New York voting Republican for the first time. But here's what Democrats are going to, what Jewish Democrats or Jews in general are going to have to make a decision. Until you crush the cultural Marxist lens of which they view the world, you will never actually be able to build support for Israel.
That's true. 100%. You can't, as long as people view it through the oppressor-oppressee dynamic, you're always going to look bad on the world stage. And you will, and you'll continue to look bad on the world stage.
You cannot subsidize support and play footsie with cultural Marxism and have a future for the state of Israel. So you have to choose. And Jews have been some of the largest funders of cultural Marxist ideas and supporters of those ideas over the last 30 or 40 years.
And this is the issue to where I'm vibing this. Warning! When I say I'm vibing it, it means less than 50% confidence. Is people view Jews as this cohesive group. Personally, I've been paid a lot of money not to believe that. No, I'm just kidding. Personally, I feel like there's a big difference between an Israeli Jew and a non-Israeli Jew, a diasporoid. I think that people that are Jewish, that are willing to move to Israel and be a part of the, I say Zionist project, but that sounds really loaded, but just to be part of the country of Israel and that want to contribute to the growth and everything of Israel, those Jews are way different in kind than Jews that are happy living in the United States and being progressive and donating those causes. Now, even the ones in the U.S. will still be like, well, yeah, I think Israel should exist. Like, I think it's a good country. We shouldn't get rid of it or anything, right? Most of the Jews in the U.S. overwhelmingly support the existence of Israel as a Jewish state, meaning there's always going to be a Jewish, I think, majority that aren't going to be hunted by other people. But I feel like it's a position more out of like history and convenience than a strong, like, oh, we got to protect Israel and the Jews. So these two groups of people are, I think they're quite different. I think they are.
Stop supporting causes that hate you. Now, you might say, well, you know, how is one thing applied to the other? If you train a generation, if you...
Check on how you're feeling about the Israeli government at the moment. I'm not following the politics there as closely, though, but just my super, like, quick pulse is I don't give a fuck what happens to Israel right now. I feel like the feeling I get is Netanyahu saw that Trump won, and so Netanyahu sees that he has infinite ability for political and military maneuvering in front of him, and he has opted to go the most brutal way possible, which in my opinion is super fucking short-sighted and will only lead to more resentment in the Middle East against Israel because it just doesn't seem like they have... I don't think, I've said this, but then Israel's been super successful militarily in the past several months, so who knows? But I don't think that Israel can win against Hamas without winning over the Palestinian people, which would require some kind of settlement with the Palestinian people. And I don't think Netanyahu feels like he's in a position where he needs to make any sacrifices to settle with the Palestinian people. So I don't know. Fuck him. I have no sympathy for whatever happens to him. Did you buy Benelli? Yeah, that's sick.
You know, how is one thing applied to the other? If you train a generation, if you everything through an oppressor-oppressed lens, they will apply that lens to the Israel-Hamas conflict.
Yep.
The same way that they apply it to the police issue, the gender issue, good guy, bad guy, somebody on top, somebody on bottom.
Why would he sign a deal now when Trump gave him all the power he needed? Well, I feel like if you care about the long-term existence of the state of Israel as a successful project in the Middle East for Jewish people, just the Palestinian issue, in my mind, is the most volatile issue in the Middle East in terms of disrupting the stability of the Middle East. The Palestinian issue is just a huge, huge blunder that the Israeli people need to figure out how to take care of. It's just so fucked. But it feels like they just don't have a drive to settle it because they feel like they can keep kicking the can down the road, and maybe somebody in the future will figure it out, or the Palestinians will get bored and leave, I guess.
Until you cleanse that ideology from the hierarchy and the academic elite of the West, there will not be a safe future. I'm not going to say Israel won't exist, but Israel will be in jeopardy as long as the Western children of the West, are being taught with primarily Jewish dollars subsidizing it to view everything through oppressor-oppressed dynamic.
Like Charlie assumes that, like, I just don't think Jews in America give a fuck about that much about Israel, such that they would change their political ideology for it. They just wouldn't, right? Why do Jews bear the responsibility for this? They're like 2% of the population, bro. What? How is that related to anything we just said?
Until you shed that ideology,
Why would Israel want to resolve the Palestinian question when they can win it by the end realistically, or am I retarded? Because I don't think there's a way to win it realistically. The Arab states have done a really good job at making sure that that Palestinian problem is intractable. The Arab resolution, what was it, 1537 or 1357, basically said nobody's allowed to give Palestinian citizenship, so the refugee numbers are growing and growing and growing. Palestinians won't leave. They don't want to leave the Gaza Strip. They're even fighting in East Jerusalem. They don't even want to apply for Israeli citizenship because they want to maintain their Palestinian identity. Most of the Palestinians in Jordan who are citizens of Jordan claim to be refugees. So the Arab world has kept that issue as open as possible, and the Palestinians aren't going to settle on it because they want to come to some resolution that carves them out some kind of state. And the Arab populations, maybe not the leadership, but the population surrounding them of Arab citizens still seem to support the idea of a Palestinian state. And the leaders can only push so far without being seen as sellouts to the Jewish people. So. How do you feel about in the next Democrat president cutting all aid to Israel until they fix the Palestine issue? The problem is that it's not about like I'm not opposed to that in principle, but it's not just a matter of like cutting aid or just a matter of like cutting funding. You need to have a president that understands Israel-Palestine, who wants to go in and fix Israel-Palestine. It can't just be light pressure. It has to be. It has to be a big push from a president that understands the issue. Yeah. Like one of the things that what was his first name? Ben-Ami in his book talks about. What's his first name? Somebody say it. Shlomo. How could I not remember that? Yeah, one of the things that Shlomo Ben-Ami talks about was that peace with Egypt, likely, in part, it was because of Sadat's big overtures towards the Israeli population to make peace, but it was also, and he used this phrase multiple times, President Carter's messianic commitment to making peace happen, that Jimmy Carter was heavily involved in trying to get peace done. And arguably, the closest the Palestinians and the Israelis have come towards like forging some kind of peace also happened under Clinton, who also had a huge commitment. Bill Clinton had a big commitment, I think, in trying to figure out stuff in the Middle East. But you can't just have a president, like I think Bush and Obama might have done this, where they were like, oh, we're going to put sanctions on people living in the West Bank. It's like, okay, I guess. It has to be U.S. leadership. Jews aren't going to solve it on their own. I'm sorry. The superior Christians need to come in and figure their shit out for them. Jews aren't going to solve it on their own. And it's just... We need U.S. leadership, I think.
You will not be able to build the case for Israel because they view Israel as an oppressor.
What about the recent aid block? Won't this lead to more destabilization? Shit is fucked. Aid block to who? Like the USAID stuff shutting down? The more chaotic the situation gets in the Middle East, the worse it is for Israel. Israel needs an uneasy peace. They need a level of stability to maintain their hold on, if you want to call it apartheid or whatever the fuck else, to maintain this like dual world they live in with the Palestinians, where they're simultaneously in their own territories, but also subjects of like a military occupation. The more chaotic it gets, remember, Hamas loves civilian death. They invite it. There's a reason why, and the reason why is because in the West, everybody views that conflict through a Marxist lens, kind of. I don't know if it's Marxist or cultural Marxist or whatever, but the oppressor-oppressee dynamics. I don't know if that's Marxist or some other better word for it. But that means that in any conflict, more Palestinians are always going to be dying because Israel's the more effective and larger state with a bigger military. Doesn't matter if the Palestinians would kill more if they could. Doesn't matter. Even if they did kill more, it wouldn't matter. Nobody talks about October 7th anymore. There's not even any sympathy for Israel for October 7th. It's just a matter of big state, small state. More chaos means more death, means more military action, means more death on the Palestinian side. Always going to make Israel look worse. So Israel needs some level of stability to maintain control of things because the more chaotic it gets, the more they're forced to strike militarily. The less stable their popular support's going to be, the bigger risk there's going to be with the surrounding Arab states being pissed off at Israel. Like, that's, yeah. Do you agree with Charlie Kirk that American Jews are responsible for the oppressor-oppressee thing? Like 20%. It's just American Jews just tend to be really, really, really progressive. But the idea that like they're solo funding all of it, that's like a kind of a, that's a weird like neo-Nazi-ish. I don't want to use the N-word. Find another word for it. But I don't think the Nazis were the first to do this. The cultural Bolshevism thing, the idea that there are these huge cultural movements that are being solo propped up by Jews. I don't think there's much truth to that. I think that Jewish people just, like, if you look at Jewish culture, they tend to super value things like education. And really the valuing of education on its own might be enough to just like have them bend really heavily in a leftward direction. Why not? It literally is created by the Nazis. Oh no, I'm trying to think if there were other, I don't know if there were other conspiracies in Europe prior to the concept of cultural Bolshevism that like blamed evolving art on Jews, but probably not. Because I think that time period was pretty particular. I'm borrowing from what I remember learning in music. It's funny because we're going over names in this Hitler book that I remember studying in music. Oh God, Schoenberg. I guess he was making in the 1900s. Yeah. That in music class, now maybe in music class, I should say music class, in college where I was being educated as a musician, not in my fourth grade music class. The way that we had learned it, now maybe they just hid all the Jewish influence from us, but the way that we had learned it was people were legitimately getting scared in this romantic era that for a lot of music history, what you really have are people kind of, one is inventing this like, I want to say even temperament, but it's not even temperament, 12 tone, I guess, like whatever, like your 12 notes, and then kind of like discovering rules for composition, like how can you make music that makes sense and works and everything. And I would argue that like Baroque and then like classical music, people like Mozart obviously are like the epitome of constructing music and patterns that works, and then it's all about our approach and resolution of our dominant seven, and it makes sense. And then when you get into like this romantic era, it's still largely following the rules, but it starts to break them in ways. You start getting, you know, like your weird voice leading stuff, like your parallel fifths and octaves. You're not supposed to do this, but it kind of works, or stuff that's like a little bit less functional. And then you move into like your kind of impressionism era where things get very unfunctional, dysfunctional, non-functional harmony. You start to see chords that should never show up. What's the name of that one song that everybody, oh fuck, no, fuck, what's it called? Somebody say it. It's like the most popular impressionist piano piece ever. Debussy. I think he was the one who, what's this song? Oh, Claire de Lune? When was this made? Hold on. He might be way, way, way after this. Let me check real quick. When was this song written? Oh no, okay, cool, 1905. When you start to move into this impressionist era, people are now breaking a lot of rules of composition. Like this is music that is starting to sound, I think, really good to contemporary ears, but oh fuck, this isn't even the song I was thinking of. This is probably like the most popular one though. There's another, what's a really, fuck, what am I thinking of? Oh, not this one. When was this written? Oh, late 1800s. Oh my God. It's almost like I have the right time period. Okay, that's good. Because if I look these up and they're like 1996. That's, oh, fuck me. This stuff is like not functional harmony. Like if you were in a music theory class and you're analyzing chords as like dominant sevens, or not dominant sevens, sorry, like major sevens, you're going to get like a mark off because these aren't even like real chords for these people. But basically, sorry, this was a really roundabout way of saying that in music, I think people started to legitimately get afraid of or have a fear of running out of songs to write. That they were going to run out of ideas, and people started to push the boundaries of, you know, what is music. You get your crazies that start to do a lot of atonal work. Schoenberg, I think, was one of the most famous, or maybe the most famous atonal composer. We started to get into a lot of shit like this, but they never mentioned anything about this all being caused by Jews. I think there were good reasons. This was the longest side step ever. I'm just saying there were good reasons why culture started to get really weird. And I think it's because after you had this peak of like figured out culture in your classical and romantic, or classical, Baroque, and then early romantic music, people started to get scared of running out of ideas, started to explore a whole bunch of crazy shit. But it wasn't because Jews were making them do it. Ah, Jesus. But I guess it's funny because if I think about it, I guess we kind of run through those moments still in the modern era where people are like, music or movies used to be beautiful and cool, and now everything sucks shit. But a lot of people, you know, we read about it in our German book. In Germany, apparently a lot of people started to feel bad about the current culture because they couldn't understand it, and it was really weird. And the phrase or the word that he uses in this book a lot is bohemian. And that when you compare, you know, like this dog shit, horrible nonsense music to like our Wagner, and you're like, how could you ever go from stuff like this when culture was at its epitome? Damn, why they got her in the corner? When did Bela Bartok write? This guy might be a modern atonal composer. Sorry. Oh no! Oh my God! My time periods are all correct. Them 3 years of college are paying off. You go from like beautiful stuff like that to Bartok wrote a lot of atonal stuff, didn't he? Hold on, this is gonna be super functional now. 1 second. Wait. The Nazis called it Entartet Kunst, basically degenerate art, and used it as a symbol of societal collapse. Okay. Okay, this is definitely not what I was thinking of. I feel like we went over Bela Bartok pieces and he had like atonal shit. Am I crazy? Who the fuck are you? Hungary was always decades behind. Shut up. Bartok's string quartet are a bit more dissonant and weird. Okay, maybe. But anyway, there you go. When culture changes a lot, though, people feel left behind, and then they look for meaning in the tried and true, like Jewish conspiracy theories.